It was in October of 2011 when a friend of mine informed me that a group of people marched on Wall Street demanding economic justice.
Okay.
Now, I completely misunderstood that. I took it as reparations. And I was like, you know what? Black people are always the last ones to know. And I was like, I'm going to go over there and find out what's going on, because they talking about Wall Street, economic justice, like they must be giving out some checks or something.
Right.
And so I, found some change around that was laying around and jumped on the PATH train. At the time, I didn't have a car, I had a pedal bike, so I rode my pedal bike downtown North to Penn Station, chained it up, jumped on the PATH train, and got off at World Trade Center, walked a few blocks down to Zuccotti Park, and was completely blown away with what I saw. I mean, it was a crowd of people packed into this kind of park space, and it was just so many different social systems being developed.
Welcome to Dustin's Kaleidoscope, where we dive deep into the stories and insights of leaders who are making a difference. Today, we have a truly inspiring guest, Tobias Fox, who embodies resilience and community spirit. Since 2011, he has been a driving force in bringing people together through programs and events focused on environmental and socioeconomic issues. His journey is rooted in overcoming tremendous adversity, from growing up in a household of 16 with scarce resources to the profound loss of his mother and younger brother during his teenage years. These experiences have fueled his passion for making a difference and have strengthened his determination to drive change in his community. He is also an organizer, agriculturalist, and visual storyteller. Above all, he is a dedicated father who finds solace in the garden. Join us as we explore the remarkable journey of Tobias Fox and uncover the lessons he's learned along the way. Tobias, thank you so much for joining me yet again.
You're welcome.
I'm really excited to talk to you about what you've been doing now. But as I explained to you right before we started this, I'm so interested in finding out about why you decided to do this. So take us back and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Right. So first, I want to say thanks for having me. It's great to see you again and share this space with you. I understand there's been some budget cuts for you, because last time we were drinking wine.
In the studio, right? Having a good old time.
We had wine and cheese.
Now we have water.
But everything is good for me. It's been an interesting journey, because my upbringing growing up in East Orange in a household of 16, I had never saw myself being heavily engaged in agriculture, and definitely not having a leadership position in agricultural development in highly populated, urbanized communities, And so this is great. So for me, coming out of a world of book publishing and creative writing, creative storytelling, and then going into the world of activism and becoming an agriculturalist, farmer, I had no idea that's where my life was going to go. And so in 2011 is when my world at that time came crashing down on me.
Okay.
I was like 10 years deep into independent publishing mostly.
Okay.
And when our financial resources get cut off, it has a direct impact on our social life as well.
Right.
And I needed a place to live, because I had no income coming in and no longer could afford to pay rent. So found myself sleeping on my cousin's couch, and also down at the welfare office applying for SNAP benefits, food stamps, as a means to feed myself. And then also trying to decide not only how did this happen and where do I go from here,
Right.
just trying to figure out, like, how do I reinvent myself and what direction I want to go into my life. Because up until that point, I just knew I was going to become a filmmaker.
Even though you were doing the independent publishing.
Yeah, my goal was I was converting some people's novels into screenplays, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, and doing like screenplay adaptations for certain people's novels. I was an acquisitions editor. I was a ghostwriter for some people. It was in October of 2011 when a friend of mine informed me that a group of people marched on Wall Street demanding economic justice.
Okay.
Now, I completely misunderstood that. I took it as reparations. And I was like, you know what? Black people are always the last ones to know. And I was like, I'm going to go over there and find out what's going on, because they talking about Wall Street, economic justice, like they must be giving out some checks or something.
Right.
And so I found some change around that was laying around and jumped on the PATH train. At the time, I didn't have a car; I had a pedal bike, so I rode my pedal bike downtown Newark to Penn Station, chained it up, jumped on the PATH train, and got off at World Trade Center, walked a few blocks down to Zuccotti Park, and was completely blown away with what I saw. I mean, it was a crowd of people packed into this kind of park space, and it was just so many different social systems being developed. You know, they had a people's kitchen, and this wasn't like charity sandwiches that they were giving out. It was like they were preparing people meals.
Wow.
And it wasn't like, oh, these are meals for like homeless people. They understood that food is a social act. It's a way of bringing people together.
Right.
And so there was just people from all walks of life there. They had a drum circle, they had a medic station, they had a media station, a people's library. Wow. And I had never seen it like this before in my life. Up until that point, I thought rallies and protests was like something that happened in the past, not in 2011.
Right.
I didn't think it had a place, you know? And so it proved me completely wrong, but it also helped broaden my sense of awareness. I started to learn more about strategic organizing through this movement. I didn't know what a working group was at the time. And so I started sitting in on different working groups, seeing and understanding how people organize and what tactics they would use to express grievances that people would have.
People were open, like the people who were running the working groups were like, come on in.
Yeah, it was
open to that. Wow.
It was one working group that really threw me off, though. It was the People of Color working group.
Okay.
Yeah, it did throw me off. And so at first, of course, the name alone was, for me, as being a person of African descent, it was inviting for me.
Right. That's what you would think, right?
Right. And then when I started to experience the meetings, I was like, okay, maybe this isn't for me per se. Only because I say that because I clearly remember, one, it became a grievance circle.
Oh,
like,
okay.
People were just venting and pouring out their traumas related to institutional racism and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so I'm like, well, okay, I'm not here for that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, I mean, there are people who need that. Right. And so, and I respect that. So the working group that did pull my interest was a working group that was led by a group of educators, teachers.
Okay.
And it was like the Education Sustainability Working Group or something like that.
Okay.
And they were really like a think tank. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting.
Right.
And I really started learning from them. And then I was like, I want to borrow this name in some way, science and sustainability. I want to play off this. You know?
Yeah.
And so, and then a month later in November, a small group of people started Occupy Newark.
Okay.
And so I kind of went and introduced myself and started participating. And then so I was sharing my time between Occupy Wall Street in New York City and Occupy Newark. Occupy Wall Street is when I started getting more exposure to the use of solar technology and clean energy. There were this gentleman from Newark who would go there and do demonstrations because he still is a electrical engineer and solar technician.
Okay.
And that was the first time also I saw the pedal bike generator where you pedal a bike that generates electricity.
Right.
I started meeting farmers during Occupy Wall Street. And so I started taking the things that I got exposed to and started learning from Occupy Wall Street and introducing it into Occupy Newark.
Okay.
And then because of my writing background, I would start creating communication for Occupy Newark, and also a communication for flyers and rallies and social media. And also I helped write a grant that allowed us to receive, not a grant, a proposal that allowed us to receive $10,000 from Occupy Wall Street, who received about $1 million in donations.
Oh, okay.
And what they were doing was dispersing it out to other encampments all over the country. They had a process you had to go through to get it, but they were dispersing it out to help others who wanted to create an encampment,
right,
to be a part of the movement to be more sustainable.
Right.
And so people would attend city council meetings in Newark, and they would say, well, we just got $10,000, and Tobias, he wrote it, he helped us get this $10,000. And then they would go. And another occasion, they would go to City Hall and say, oh, we're doing this, and Tobias, and this, and Tobias, and that. And I'll be quiet, like, what's going on, What is going on here? And then somehow, I get labeled as being, one of the lead organizers for Occupy Newark. And so in that space, things started to get a little stressful because it was just so disorganized, yes,
right,
in a social system way. Right?
Okay.
I see just about all of our social systems as disorganized.
Disorganized, yeah.
So,
and are you working by yourself at this point? Or do you have a team yet? Or?
I don't have a team yet.
Okay.
I don't have a team yet.
So you're doing everything.
I'm doing everything and trying to work as a collective.
Okay.
Right? But also learning some serious lessons, right? Because like with the $10,000, it's like, okay, we're going to spend it this way. I would make the decision of how it's going to get spent. And the people living in these tents in Military Park was like, Tobias, we like what you're doing and everything. You're great, at organizing. And I didn't know I was great at organizing. I'm just doing it.
He's doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but, you don't live out here. We do. We need to use some of this money for what we want to use it for.
Okay.
We're trying to get Ocu Fly.
Right. To Occupy.
We wanted some clothes, we want some cigarettes, we want some booze, some weed.
Oh, that's funny.
And so I saw myself like having to deal with mental illness. I had to start dealing with all this stuff. People like had grievances with employment, and I'm like, where do I fit in? Where do I fit in all this, right? And then the gentleman who I met from Newark at Occupy Wall Street, who is the solar technician and electrical engineer, he heard about us receiving this large sum of money.
Okay.
And this was going into the month of February of 2012. And he also heard that we were being threatened with eviction from Military Park because we were plugging into the utilities, the lampposts.
Oh, okay.
And this was a tactic that was being used, started with Occupy to evict protesters from Occupy Wall Street, the encampment at Zuccotti Park.
Right.
And then other municipalities all over the country started using this tactic to
turning off the electricity.
Yeah, and all that stuff, right? And so
Okay.
it's like, enough is enough. We got to disrupt this.
Okay.
And so this gentleman, this solar technician, was like, hey, for a portion of the money that you receive, I can teach you guys how to turn soda cans into solar panels. And I was like, whoa, let's do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, let's explore that scientific method. I was the only one excited about it. And so that sparked the seed in my mind to create something that interests you. And so I sat down one day in March of 2012. The encampment at Military Park had been dissolved, as many encampments all over the country were being dissolved, as well as the whole Occupy movement. And so I still had this desire in me to just do things.
Yeah.
And
You're still solo.
right,
You're still flying
right.
solo.
And
Okay.
so, and then I said, let me create a mission statement for North Science and Sustainability Working Group,
Okay.
focusing on sustainable living practices, solar technology. And at the time, agriculture was not involved. It was all about clean energy. It was all about
Okay.
clean energy because I had no exposure to agriculture. My exposure was only from the use of clean energy, from what I saw, from what was pitched to me as, hey, I can help you guys do this. And I was like, wow, I want to get more into this. And so my idea was to identify people with these skill sets and create a platform for them to do what they do. Not for me to share a spotlight, but for me to be in the background as you're off camera. Off my camera, I wanted to be off camera for these people who I identified as very talented people, social philosophers, as I saw some of them, and I wanted to help elevate their voice and the work they do. And so that was my idea in my mind. That's what I thought I was going to do. And I put out this mission statement into a Google group that was managed by Occupy North. And I was like, meet me at, in the cafeteria at Essex County College if you're interested.
Right.
And so at the end of that day, I was joined by about 8 or 9 other local green enthusiasts.
Wow.
The mission statement resonated with them, including the gentleman who's a solar technician.
Okay.
And we just started talking about what green stuff we can do. And no one identified themselves as gardeners at that time.
Everybody was just there for the energy aspect.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so we just started saying, okay, well, first things first, let's organize a trip to an organic farm. Let's start promoting and talking more about organic agriculture and organic farming.
Right.
And so then we was like, what's next? Just trying to think of things. And it was like, oh, well, we have a solar technician. Let's organize a workshop series around solar technology.
Right.
And so, okay, great, let's do that. And then I started working as a healthcare organizer. So at this point, throughout most of throughout most of 2011, going into 2012, I was unemployed.
Okay.
And how I got reemployed was a person in our organizing network. Young lady was like, Tobias, it's a nonprofit organization looking for a healthcare organizer. You're really good at organizing. You should apply. I'm like, well, I don't know anything about the healthcare system.
Right.
And they was like, no, they'll teach you that, but they can't teach you what you already know how to do.
Which is the
organizing part. Yeah, and it's like, you should really apply.
Right.
And I did, and I got hired. And she was right. This was right before the Affordable Care Act came into place, aka Obamacare.
Yep.
And so my job was to figure out what was causing so many residents in certain neighborhoods of North, what's causing them to visit the emergency room so much, because there were just a lot of unpaid receipts coming through the emergency room, where people would go to the emergency room, get service, they get billed, and those bills would get unpaid by the client. And so I had to help understand what's causing that behavior.
Right.
Which was, I think, obvious. It was like, one, no health insurance.
Right.
They're treating the emergency room as their primary care physician, not because they have a choice, And then trying to work with residents to create some type of intervention. And the intervention was a complete disaster because I had no resources to offer, right? It worked on a small scale, like, hey, let's have like a cooking workshop. Let's have this smoothie demonstration.
Right.
But I didn't have any funding, no resources to kind of really put anything into play. It was all about political organizing.
Okay.
Let's get them riled up enough where they can put more demands on their elected officials. And so it helped me understand the type of organizing or the type of organizer that I'm not. I'm not a political organizer. I am what a person would call a community organizer, someone who works with stakeholders within the community to identify a social issue and try to bring about some significant changes.
Okay.
And so, and not working in theory, but okay, we have the report. Now let's put theory into practice by creating that intervention, right?
Okay.
And so I'm working as a healthcare organizer, and then I also launched this working group, North Science and Sustainability, and now we're doing this green stuff. And then someone I met at an event, social event in 2012, going into the spring, who I'm still friends with to this day, Alexander Markelitis. He was a life science teacher at the time at a charter school in Newark. And at this social event, he informed me that the city of Newark has an adopt a lot program where you can adopt a vacant lot for $1, sign an annual lease, and with the purpose of transforming that vacant lot into some type of green space.
Okay.
So
And what qualified as green space? Like, explain.
Community garden or some type of, parks were kind of like iffy, that was taking it to another level
Okay.
of community interaction
Okay.
because of safety issues.
Oh,
and
someone
all
gets hurt or something
it's
like that. Okay.
and then, so, and then it's like, what type of park is it, because it's supposed to be for temporary use.
Oh, I see.
And you're not, you're
Got
trying
it,
to,
because you have to return it.
right.
Okay.
And so they had all these stipulations, but, gardens was definitely a safe and okay to do.
Right.
And so also in the spring of 2011, I was really charged up with this idea because I was watching so many YouTube videos on people growing their own food.
Right.
Had these good food movements going on.
Yeah.
And that's my introduction to the urban farmer guru, Will Allen, out of Wisconsin. So I was just watching all these, and I'm like, wow, we can do it in Newark? Oh, absolutely. The people in the working group at the time, they jumped at it as well. And it wasn't until we actually adopted a vacant lot and started going through the process of transforming it to a vacant lot. It was one day that, and I'm always, again, the visual storyteller, documenting everything, taking pictures,
Right.
posting it on social media. Every time a new social media platform came out, I was on it, registering, signing up, posting photos and everything, what we're doing,
Right.
video clips of what we're doing. And so it was 3 elders in the group. These 3 middle-aged European-American women who approached me one day when we were in the garden, and they says, Tobias, we love what you're doing. You're great at working with people. Again, hearing this
Leadership.
hearing this
Common theme here.
And but we noticed, like, every time you come to the garden, you just stand around and watch everyone else work. You don't know anything about gardening, do you? And I says, no, I don't. And they says, well, we're going to teach you everything we know. And these 3 women became my mentors, my teachers.
Right.
And they, sure enough, started teaching me everything. And I started coupling that with the things that I learned on social media. And then I started really feeling more confident. I started taking workshops and stuff like that. And so I just kept enhancing my skill sets in agriculture. And then someone gave me a whisper of advice. It's like, Tobias, you're doing a lot with little to no resources. You should really consider turning this into a nonprofit, because I was working as a healthcare organizer. It started out with a nonprofit organization, and then a year later, it transitioned over to working for a community health center. And I think I was getting paid like $16 an hour. But every time I had enough money to kind of like invest it into North Science Sustainability, I would do just that, because we didn't have any resources. Somebody had to sustain it.
So you were working your other job and
Full time,
and you were doing this in addition, which was probably a good chunk of your time.
Right.
And you were using the resources, the funding from your full-time job to fund the
and I'm a parent, and it was like, what in the world are you doing on this small income? But somebody had to do it. It was like, I started seeing it as, I think your passion is as good as you're willing to invest into it yourself, Okay. And so if you're really passionate about it, you should be willing to invest in it, yourself,
Right.
And so I grew up in a household of 16. We wasn't taught that we had to lean on others to solve our problems. We had to figure out a way to solve our own problems.
Okay.
I was raised by my aunt and uncle, and we couldn't blame our mother and father for our living situation. We wasn't brought up that way. No one complained about a situation like that. And so it's like you got to figure out your own solutions. And so that was instilled in me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when someone suggested I should turn this into a nonprofit organization, I started thinking about how do I do that, right? And so I just reflected on back in the 90s, I used to volunteer at a woman's nonprofit, great grassroots-led nonprofit in East Orange. It was a community arts nonprofit. And whenever she had issues, she would always talk about this professor, Robert Holmes, at Rutgers Law School. And a few times she took us down to Rutgers Law School to meet him because she was trying to get us to be active board members.
Oh, okay.
And I'm, like young, like in college, and I'm like,
Right.
Okay. And so, but as our minds work, and so it brought me back to that experience. And I was like, I wonder if they still have this law clinic,
Right.
At Rutgers Law School. I went online, sure enough, they did. And I'm like, oh, Rutgers Community Law Clinic. And they had a phone number on the website, so I called them up. A law student answered the phone, and I told him what we were doing. We had a website, so we was very active, I gave him, so I'm pitching to him over the phone, and then he asked if he can get the website address and everything, and he says, all right, I'll take your phone number, I'll talk it over with my professor, and if he say we can work on this, I'll get back to you. And within a week's time, they got back to me and says, we'll help you out. And so Rutgers took me on Rutgers Law School through their community law clinic. They took me on as one of their clients and helped me establish our working group, or reestablish our working group, into a 501c3 nonprofit organization.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's how that really kind of came about. And so I had to continue playing in this leadership position, still working full time. North SAS was my part-time escape, fulfillment,
Right. 'Cause that was your passion.
It was my passion.
Right.
It was my passion. And so it really wasn't until 2016 when things started to change for me. First, it was between 2013 and 2014, after bombarding Facebook with the work that we're doing, I get an email from someone says, hey, I love what you're doing. This is great. I'm from Newark. I don't live there now. I'm in Florida now, but I'm from Newark. My mother is still there. I'm a grant writer. How can I help you?
Oh, wow.
I says, well, you just answered that one. Because I'm writing my own grants. It's like doing everything don't work out.
Right.
And so, and I haven't received the grant up until then. So,
you were applying. You're definitely applying.
I was applying, but not like rigorous. I wasn't like that active.
Okay. Hi, we hope you're enjoying this episode of Dustin's Kaleidoscope. We're just taking a quick break to remind you to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode and you'll stay updated with all the amazing content we have in store. If you're finding value in our conversations, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more people who can benefit from these stories. And don't forget to share this episode with your friends, family, or anyone who you think may enjoy or learn from it. Now let's get back to our conversation. So you were applying for the grant, but
I wasn't that actively, I wasn't that active and aggressive with it.
Right.
Because I was doing so much, because I'm a really hands-on, in the field type of person.
Right.
And so for me to start writing, it's like a whole process. It's a mental process. It's like,
right. Even though you're a writer, and even though you were doing the ghost writing, it's a different type of writing.
It's a different type of writing.
Yeah.
This is like business writing, technical writing.
Yeah.
And so creative writing is a totally different approach. And so I said, great, and she identified, her name is Jacqueline Beto. We're collaborators to this day. And so Jacqueline Beto came aboard, and 2014 we started working with each other. And then another person who I'm still working with to this day, Roxana Mataquin, she became introduced to North Science and Sustainability, Inc. And she comes as a visual artist, art therapist, avid gardener, herbalist. And so she just started pouring a lot of herself into the organization based on what she was being exposed to and seeing, witnessing, and just wanted to be a part of that energy, And so it was great. And so then I remember in 2016, Jacqueline Beto, Dr. Jacqueline Beto today, her and I applied for a grant, and we got the grant in 2016, our first grant ever, and we celebrated like it was nobody's business. The grant was only $2,000.
It may as well have been like $2 million.
It felt like $2 million. And it didn't come in a form of $2,000. It came in $1,000 worth of high-end gardening tools.
Okay.
And $1,000 Home Depot gift card.
Okay.
Well, we was like, we rich. And so it was great. And so that was for me, us, was a turning point, because every time up until that point, it was like hit and miss. And then a person who I became good friends with named Sybil Bose. Sybil, her and I, we met each other during my time at Essex County College.
Oh, okay.
She was teaching there. And she sent me an email on Facebook in 2016, like, hey, Tobias, I don't know if you remember me. I was teaching at Essex County College, but now I'm working for Whole Foods. I don't know if you know, Whole Foods is opening up in Newark, and she was like, I think the community liaison or something like that. And Whole Foods are introducing their foundations into Newark as well. And so they're bringing a lot of funding with them. And I'm doing a guided tour for the executive director at that time of Whole Cities Foundation. And I have you on my list. Actually, Tobias, I have you at the top of my list as the first person for their executive director to meet with. But you have to be, I think it was like some ridiculous time, like 7:30 in the morning. Something like that. I was like, really? Seriously?
That's the only time.
Come on. I'm like, what is up with these people? And so she was like, Tobias, you better be at this. I think like 8 in the morning. I think it was like 8 in the morning. I'm like, why? So anyway, and so Meredith Taylor is her name, and so I'm the first person Meredith Taylor meet when she comes to Newark during her walking tour of meeting all the community stakeholders heavily engaged in agriculture and food justice work and all that stuff, And then that same day, I have to go I'm a part of a panel and the entire program that was like a merge between folks at Montclair State University and Rutgers Newark campus. And this turned out to be a full day program. I didn't really understand the itinerary until the day of the event, because I was participating in the panel discussion. And I don't consider myself as like this orator, social philosopher. And so people are always asking me to come speak at events. It takes me time to process my thoughts. It's like, right. I'm not that type of artist, And so I just become wowed out by other people who are very, just know how to put words together on the fly. And I'm like, wow, this person can talk. And so I'm in this space, and then I look at the itinerary. It's like, oh, not only are they having this panel discussion, but they also having a cocktail hour at the Rooftop Hotel in Newark. Then they're gonna have a dinner and it's like moving around. I'm like, and I could be a part of all this? I'm like, yeah, all of us. I'm like, okay, awesome. And so I go to the cocktail hour later that day, and I walk into the hotel, go up to the rooftop lounge, and people are like, oh no, it hasn't started yet, you're early. I'm like, what? I'm the first one? I'm like, oh no, this is not gonna happen. So I'm like, let me leave and come back. Let me go outside or something. And so I go outside, and then I get a phone call, and it's like from Sybil Bose. She's like, Tobias, what are you doing going in and out of the hotel? I'm like, are you staying there? I'm like, are you following me? I'm like, how do you know I'm going out of a hotel? Like, what is going on? She's like, no, I just rode by you and I saw you. And she says, I'm with Meredith Taylor. She's actually staying in that hotel. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, look, I have 2 daughters and she hasn't had dinner. I was going to take her to get something to eat, but I need to go home to my daughters. I've been working all day. Do you mind if she, accompany you at this event you're going to? And you can finish your conversation with her,
right, yeah.
And everything. She really, this will give you more time to talk. She really liked what you were saying earlier when she met with you. I'm like, okay, great, awesome.
Right.
Tell her to come upstairs to the, rooftop. And she did. She came up, and now it looks like I'm a celebrity because I was already a panelist at this event,
right.
And it carried over to this cocktail hour. So it's like, hey, Tobias, hey, Tobias, hey, Tobias. Oh, who is this, Tobias? And it's like introducing. And then they had like a shuttle bus to transport everyone to the different locations that are being activated, from the panel, from the college campus, Rutgers North campus, to the hotel for the cocktail hour, to the Ironbound section of Newark, to the restaurant. So they had a shuttle, and I'm like, well, we don't need to go on no shuttle. Like, no, we can walk. I'm like, we good. And I was telling her,
I know my way around.
Yes. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not jumping on no shuttle to move around downtown Newark. I'm not doing that. So Meredith was like, okay, well, let's go, Tobias. Now, this particular day is also, and I didn't know all this stuff was going on, I'm learning the day as it unfolds, Didn't know about the cocktail hour, the dinner, until I became the time I'm up at the panelist. As a panelist, during a panel discussion, they're like, oh, here's the itinerary. And I'm like, oh, I can go to the cocktail hour too? Like, yeah, this is all. I'm like, oh, okay. Now, as we are leaving the cocktail hour, the hotel, walking into the Ironbound section, it's all, connected to downtown Newark. I also didn't know this was like the kickoff for the, what is it called? I forget the name of it. It's North Arts is part of it, and they turned the whole downtown area into like this walking art tour for a whole weekend or whatever. And this was the kickoff for it.
Okay.
And they had the kickoff ceremony inside of the Prudential Arena.
Oh yeah, okay.
And so as we are passing the Prudential Arena, people are pouring out onto the street. Hey, Tobias. Hey, Tobias.
So definitely a celebrity.
Yes. Like, hey, Tobias. And this woman who I know, she had a camera. She was recording. She was a part of the media department of Essex County College.
Okay.
Can I take a quick interview of you and this and that? And Meredith was like, wow, you're really popular. And so we had that interaction. And then we continued to walk into the Ironbound. And it was these 3 young men. I was once their mentor from a part-time job I had. It was a live-in part-time job I had with them. and we all lived in the same space, and they walking past us, hey, Tobias, what's up? Hey, what's going on, man? And she was like, wow, you like know the whole city.
Right.
And I'm like, well,
And this would not have happened if you had taken that shuttle.
yes, yes, correct. And so now we go to the dinner, we eat, and then she gets to meet all these different people and everything. And then I walk her back to the hotel and says, Tobias, it's been great. And then as we're walking and talking, it's like, man, it'd be great if we could come up with something we could do collectively, your organization, our organization, that could support some initiatives year round, not just a one-time grant,
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, wow. And then she sends me an email later on reiterating that same idea.
Okay.
And I'm like, wow.
Like, this is awesome.
This is awesome. It's a great day.
Right?
It started at 8 a.m. And it ended, I think, maybe at midnight or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this was a long day. And I was like, this was eventful.
Right.
And so we collectively came up with the Newark Community Food System.
Okay.
Which is really a network of local growers. And so not only am I the founder and managing director of Newark Science and Sustainability, Inc., I'm also the founder and facilitator of the Newark Community Food System, which consists of about 20 local growers across Newark, where we come to see each other as a resource.
Okay.
We support each other initiatives, and they also support the 3 community events that I organize throughout the year. And so,
wow.
And so when I get funding, it allows me to tap into our network. Okay. Oh, I want to contract you to do some workshops, and we see each other as a resource,
And it's so, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that just shows that you are helping the entire community. You just said, I'm tapping into this person, you can outsource to this person.
Absolutely.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
At what point did you finally realize, yes, I am a leader? Or are you still struggling with that? Because you talked about 2 different organizations.
That's true.
At what point?
I think very recently, I was like, accept this role.
Okay.
Accept it.
Okay.
Because I always say there's 3 perspectives in life, right? And so there's this the first perspective is how you see yourself. The second perspective is how you see me.
Uh-huh.
And the third perspective is how I think you see me, right? And so I never really saw myself as a leader. And I didn't think you saw me. I never thought you would see me as a leader until you say it.
That's so interesting.
Right. Until you say it, I'm like, oh, I didn't know this qualifies leadership. I didn't know. Wasn't no one in my house like, no one in my household growing up in the house of 16, no leaders. Maybe my aunt who helped raise us, and then my uncle having to deal with so much. But in the way we define leadership, I didn't know what that looks like. So when people was saying like, hey, Tobias, you're good at being an organizer, you're good at this, you're good at that.
Right.
I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know.
But you know what? Earlier in the conversation, when you talked about living with your aunt and uncle,
mm-hmm.
and you said there was nobody, who was I going to tell about my circumstances? So you just did what you had to do.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that, just in its purest form, is a form of leadership, because you had to do it on your own.
Right.
You had to find the resources or whatever you had to do.
That's true.
To get whatever you needed to get. So I think if you take it back to that point in time, you were showing leadership, abilities then.
Oh, that's cool. That's thing. And so and you know what? And I think that's the difference with the conversations I have with people in my network when they say, "Oh no, they should just give us this land. They see what we're doing." Then there's others who are a part of Native American cultural lineage who feel like this is part of the Lenape land. And then there's others in our group who's like, well, you can't forget the transatlantic slave trade. You can't forget those. You can't forget 40 acres and a mule. But for me, growing up in the household of 16, it was never a question of saying an outside agency entity owe you anything.
Okay.
It was like, we gotta figure this out. you know.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's been my approach. Like, gotta figure it out.
So as you know, we're getting toward the end of this, and you've been doing this for a while, and you're clearly a leader, and part of being a leader is identifying things that need to be done, and whether or not you are gathering people to do these things or helping facilitate, sort of like what the women at the garden said, like, you're here, but you don't really know how to garden, right? But you went and they taught you, and then you took the initiative to like take other classes. What would you tell people? What advice would you give them if they are thinking about doing things, but they're like, I don't know how to do it, so I'm just going to let somebody else do it? What was the impetus for you even do the gardening?
Yeah, so my thing is I'm facilitating our internship program with 7 very bright college-age interns. And anyone that I interact with and asks me for their advice, I always say, expose yourself to as much as you can, right? And so through that exposure, it allows you to figure out your strengths and weaknesses. And once you start figuring out your strengths and weaknesses, focus on your strengths. Let other people deal with your weaknesses. Focus on your strengths and build on what moves you. And you will start seeing other people gravitate to that energy pool.
Okay, that's profound. I don't know what else to say after that. That is so wonderful.
That's what I do. That's
You focus on what you know how to do and just
Absolutely.
strengthen that. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
You've been on the show before, but this time I really appreciate us being able to get into some of the stories that you've told us and everything. So thank you so much for coming back.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dustin's Kaleidoscope. We hope you found our conversation with Tobias Fox as inspiring and insightful as we did. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review and 5-star rating. Your support helps us continue to bring you incredible stories and valuable insights from leaders making a difference. Don't forget to share this episode with friends, family, and anyone else who might find it valuable. I'm Dustin Dumas, and I will see you next time. Bye.